Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be having a little discussion on weight ranges for specific bullets. I have a whiteboard here with some notes. I have a handwritten card. I normally don't write myself a script more or less for this, but I figured with the amount of information that I'm going to cover in such a short amount of time, it's probably necessary to start off with the um, general breakdown. And this all came from my reading of Long Range Shooting Handbook, A Beginner's Guide to Precision Rifle Shooting by Ryan Kleckner. Um, this was one of the topics that got brought up in the book about bullets and the weights, twist rates, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to read from this little script here for the beginning, and then we're going to get on to the what's going on the whiteboard. I do have a picture of this. I will insert it when I start reading off of that. So I have written here, within each caliber is weight ranges for bullets. They break down into three generalized sections: light for caliber, typical for caliber, and heavy for caliber. Each one of these categories has pros and cons. And for the sake of this video, I'm going to be referencing 308 Winchester quite a lot because that's what I have the most experience with as far as experimentation, different weight ranges, what works, and what my experience vastly revolves around when it comes to reloading. As far as atypical for caliber, they commonly use barrel twist rate to determine if the specific bullet weight will be stable in flight. And that's that. Good to go with that. So, like I said, I'm going to be referencing 308 a lot because, like I said, that's what I started out reloading. That's what I have the most experience with as far as experimentation and trying different things. I've shot everything from 110 grains all the way up to 200 grain bullets out of my 308, which is a 1 in 10 twist for anybody that's interested in knowing that. And we're going to segue into our whiteboard here. I have it broken down into three categories: the light for caliber, typical, and heavy for caliber. And I'm going to go over the kind of just some bullet points, some distinguishing features about the round weight ranges themselves. So light for caliber for 308 is somewhere in the 110 to 135 grain range. Typically, you go from light for caliber, you stop at the heaviest available bullet. So 110 to 135 grain. They're typically used for smaller game stuff like I have a 110 grain load that runs really well in my rifle. I have it specifically developed for coyote hunting. I mean, in theory, you could use it for smaller, but I don't really see a point in a big 30 cal like that. If you're going for a smaller game like groundhogs, prairie dogs, small stuff, probably better off using a 22 250, 22 223, or 223 AI. What else? There's a couple other ones that are pretty decent stuff for small game like that, but the 110s I use for coyotes, and they seem to work pretty well out to about 300 yards, and then they start getting the group starts opening up from what I would consider a ethical kill shot to questionable, So the pro with light for caliber bullets is you can send them really fast. Like I have my coyote loads, they're developed at 3,200 feet per second right now, but I've pushed them up to 300 or 3,500 feet per second. So they're they're screaming in comparison to off the shelf 308 ammo. They're just screaming past them. Uh, and the one of the cons with light for caliber bullets is they're more susceptible to wind drift out at distance. Like I said, mine do really good grouping up to about 400 yards, 300, 400 yards, and then they start to open up. I would still feel comfortable taking a shot past that, maybe if the conditions were right, but I would have to be fairly confident in the conditions and my shot placement before I even attempted that. So that's it for light for caliber. Typical for caliber is going to be somewhere in the 150 to 180 range. That's you're going to find most of your off the shelf over the counter loads. The box ammo is going to be in the 150 to 180 range. That seems to work pretty well in most of the different rifles platforms, with a variety of twist rates included in that. And they're the middle of the road kind of weight. They're the like I said, they're typical for caliber. A lot of your bulk ammo is going to be 150, 148, 165. That's going to be a lot of your bulk ammos that you buy. Military surplus ammo is going to be in the 150-ish range as well. So typical for caliber, they work pretty well in pretty much every gun you put them in. Unfortunately, my gun doesn't like the off the shelf loads very much. My gun's a little picky when it comes to bullets, so that's what got me into reloading in the first place. Is I couldn't get what I would consider a good group size with off the shelf ammo. So that's what got me into reloading originally. And then we got heavy for caliber. Heavy for caliber is going to be your 180 to 220 range in the 30 cal for 308 specifically. And it's going to be moving really slow. I have one of my deer loads is 2,500 feet per second. I think it's pretty slow. Typical, the bumping back up to typical for caliber. Typical for caliber off the shelf ammo is going to be somewhere between 27 and 2,900 feet per second. I mean, like 29 is pretty high. 2,600, 2,700 feet per second is about where that typical for caliber ammo is as far as velocities. So heavy for caliber, it's going to be slow because it's heavy. You know, it's just kind of the trade off. You're moving more mass down the same amount of barrel with typically less powder, because if you use the same amount of powder you get unsafe circumstances. One of the pros for the heavy for caliber is going to be they are typically long bullets with a high ballistic coefficient, and that's just how well the bullet cuts through the air. It's how aerodynamic it is in flight. And that being said, since they're long, they are not as susceptible to wind drift. Well, I shouldn't say that. Typically, they're not as susceptible to wind drift. And another con is they're more likely to hit transonic speed in flight, depending on how far of a distance you're shooting. Transonic speed is that transitional period between supersonic and subsonic. So the speed of sound is right around 1150 feet per second, somewhere in that. It's different depending on altitude and conditions and all that, but typically speaking, it's right around 1100 to 1150 feet per second is where your subsonic point is. So anywhere between, like, I don't know, I think it's about 1300 or so, 1300 feet per second to that subsonic window is considered transonic speed. And once you hit transonic speed, a lot of different things start to affect the bullet in certain ways. As far as what happens to the bullet in flight, the transonic window is where it becomes more likely to pitch and yaw and start to destabilize in flight. So if your target is less than the distance that it takes for your bullet to go from supersonic to subsonic, as long as your target is before that transonic speed window, you shouldn't have a problem using a heavy bullet. But if you were to say, I don't know the details right off the top of my head, but I know that transonic speed for my 178s is about, what's the distance on that? I'd have to say probably about 700 yards or so. So if I'm taking a shot past 700 yards, I have a lot more things to take into consideration than if I was shooting 600 and close. 600 and closer, I should say. So that's something you're going to have to take into consideration. Now, that being said, there are use cases where my 3,500 feet per second light for caliber may be better at longer distance because it's moving so much faster. It covers more distance before it hits the transonic window. Like, I know that these are good. The light for calibers are good out until, oh man, I just looked this up last night. I want to say 800 or 900 yards, and I'm still above the transonic window. Whereas, like I said, my heavy for caliber stuff is 700 or so is the general window to where I start hitting my transonic speeds. So there are some cases where light for caliber may be better than heavy for caliber. There's a bunch of different arguments. This is all, well, not all of it. Most of this is going to be opinion based. It's going to depend on your rifle, your load developments, your specific situations, the environment. There's a lot of things that come into play here, and most of all, it's opinion based. Like, a lot of people like to shoot light and fast bullets because they shoot flatter, or um, they have less flight time, or on the flip end of that, some people like to shoot heavier bullets because they carry more mass. But then the science, as dictated by oh man, my other book. Oh my, I can't remember. There's an excerpt from a fellow in my other book that I'm reading that he ran a like hunting outfit, guide service, and they found that lighter bullets, even though they have less mass initially, they carry that mass more efficiently than heavier bullets. So a lot of people want to say, oh, stopping power, oh, knockdown power. It doesn't matter. What really matters is the amount of mass that is retained on target once you hit that target. So, long story short, going to wrap this up. Most of this is opinion based. It all depends on what your rifle likes. It all depends on what you feel comfortable with. There's a bunch of circumstances. The environment plays a massive role in this as well. So there's not one specific right answer. There's a right answer for each individual situation, and those situations are always changing. Everything's always adapting. So it's better to have multiple options, let's say. So keep that in mind. This is gonna wrap it up here. This was just a quick hip fire on bullet weights and weight ranges and some of the pros and cons that go into it. If you're interested in figuring some of this stuff out on your own, do your own research. It never hurts. You have the world at your fingertips in your phone. You have computers. There's so many different resources that you can access nowadays that you can do research on and figure out what you want to do, what might be right for you in your specific circumstances. So that'll do it. Till next time.